It is August 27th, 1984. Inside the San Francisco Civic Auditorium, thousands of delegates have been on their feet for 6 straight minutes. Not because a president walked in, not because a rock star took the stage, because a black man, the son of a teenage mother, born in poverty in Greenville, South Carolina, just finished a speech that made hardened political veterans weep openly in their seats. His name was Jesse Louis Jackson, and in that moment, with the entire country watching, he said something that 40 years later still sops people cold.
My constituency is the desperate, the damned, the disinherited, the disrespected, and the despised.
He was not the nominee. He would never become president. And yet, no speech at a major political convention in American history, before or since, has ever been downloaded, reprinted, shared, and studied more than the one Jesse Jackson gave that night. In 1984, Jesse Jackson won 3.5 million primary votes. In 1988, he won 6.9 million. Second only to eventual nominee Michael Dukakis. No black candidate in U.S. history had ever come close. But this video is not about the votes. It is not about the losses. It is about a man who changed what was possible, not just for black Americans, but for every outsider, every underdog, every person who was told to wait their turn and refused. This is the story of Jesse Jackson, and most of what you think you know about him is incomplete. Before we go back to the beginning, let's establish something important. The conversation about who gets to run for president, who gets to have power, who gets to be taken seriously, that conversation is still happening right now in every election cycle, in every boardroom, on every social media feed. Jesse Jackson started that conversation in rooms where no one like him had ever been allowed to sit. He sat anyway. He was the first black candidate to ever win a major U.S. state primary. He was the man who registered millions of black voters who had never voted before. He negotiated directly with foreign heads of state, without a title, without permission, without apology. Jackson's 2 presidential campaigns directly inspired the political infrastructure that 2 decades later made Barack Obama's 2008 campaign operationally possible. Obama himself acknowledged this publicly. This is not ancient history. This is the foundation of the floor you're standing on. October 8th, 1941, Greenville, South Carolina. Jesse Louis Burns is born to Helen Burns, a 16-year-old girl, and Noah Lewis Robinson, a married man who lived next door. In the segregated American South, that combination, illegitimate birth, black mother, no father in the home, was a life sentence of invisibility. The family had almost nothing. Helen's mother, Matilda, took in laundry to keep them alive. They lived in a neighborhood where the sidewalks ended at the edge of the black community because no one had built them any further. When Jesse was a boy, he tried to join the Boy Scouts. He was turned away, not because of anything he did, but because the troop was whites only. He went home and started his own troop. His mother later married Charles Henry Jackson, who gave Jesse his last name and, more importantly, a steady model of dignity under pressure. Jesse Jackson Sr., the stepfather, worked 3 jobs. He never missed a church Sunday. It was in church that Jesse found his voice. The black church in the American South was not just a place of worship. It was a political organization, a mutual aid society, a training ground for orators. Every Sunday, young Jesse watched preachers transform hopeless people into hopeful ones with nothing but words and conviction. He filed that away. He would need it later. By high school, Jesse Jackson was already not fitting into the box people built for him. He was a star quarterback at Sterling High School, an all-black school, because in Greenville, that was the only kind there was. The local professional team, the Greenville Spinners, offered him a contract. He turned it down. A full athletic scholarship to the University of Illinois was waiting. He left South Carolina for the first time in his life. Although he did pledge Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated at University of Illinois, it ultimately didn't work out. They told him, a black freshman, that the quarterback position wasn't available to him. Whether the reason was race, politics, or something else, Jesse Jackson did not stay around to find out. He transferred to North Carolina A&T, an HBCU in Greensboro, North Carolina. Greensboro, North Carolina, 1963. Jesse Jackson was not in Greensboro by accident. 4 students from NCA&T had launched the Woolworth's lunch counter sit-in in 1960. By the time Jackson arrived, the civil rights movement had set the city on fire. At NCA&T, Jesse Jackson became a student leader, then a protest organizer, then something harder to name, the person other people instinctively followed into danger. In 1965, he drove to Selma, Alabama. The Voting Rights March was happening. Dr. Martin Luther King was there. The photographs from that march, the ones of state troopers on horseback swinging clubs at unarmed marchers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, had been on the front page of every newspaper in the world. Jesse Jackson wasn't just watching, he went. In Selma, Jesse Jackson met Dr. King. The two men were separated by 12 years. King was 36, Jackson was 24. But King recognized something in the young man. Jackson was recruited into the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, and eventually appointed to lead Operation Breadbasket, the economic arm of the civil rights movement. Operation Breadbasket was brilliant in its simplicity. Jackson's team would approach major corporations doing business in black communities, grocery chains, banks, construction companies, and present them with one clear demand: hire black workers, stock black-owned products, and deposit in black-owned banks, or face boycott. It worked. In Chicago alone, Operation Breadbasket secured more than 3,000 jobs for black workers and extracted millions of dollars in contracts for black-owned businesses within 4 years. Operation Breadbasket's Chicago chapter under Jackson generated an estimated $22 million in annual income gains for black workers between 1966 and 1971 through targeted corporate negotiations and boycotts. Then came April 4th, 1968, the day that changed everything.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm only going to talk to you just for a minute or so this evening because I have some very sad news for all of you. Could you lower those signs, please? I have some very sad news for all of you, and I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee. Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. Jesse Jackson was in the courtyard below. In the chaos and grief that followed, Jackson's account of being with Dr. King in his final moments became both deeply meaningful to millions and disputed in its details, a complexity that would follow him for years. But what was not disputed was this: Jesse Jackson was 26 years old when the man he called his mentor was murdered, and instead of retreating, he accelerated. King's assassination on April 4th, 1968 triggered civil unrest in over 100 U.S. cities. It also galvanized a generation of young black leaders, Jackson among them, to carry forward the movement by different methods. In 1971, Jesse Jackson parted ways with the SCLC and founded his own organization, People United to Save Humanity, Operation Push. The name said everything. This was not a petition. This was not a prayer circle. This was pressure applied systematically to the economic and political structures that kept Black Americans out. Operation Push launched in Chicago in 1971 with a simple but radical mission: connect Black economic demand to Black economic power. By the late 1970s, it had negotiated landmark agreements with Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch, and major automobile manufacturers. The Coca-Cola agreement alone was worth $34 million in advertising, distribution contracts, and jobs for Black-owned businesses. Anheuser-Busch followed with a similar arrangement. These were not handouts. These were business agreements extracted from companies that had been profiting from Black consumers while excluding Black workers and entrepreneurs. Jackson's formula was ironclad. We buy your product, we deserve a share of what our buying builds. And if you disagree, we stop buying. At the same time, Jackson was building the infrastructure of Black civic life in ways that don't fit neatly into a headline. The Saturday morning push meetings in Chicago became a cultural institution. Tens of thousands showed up. Not for politics, but for community. Jackson preached, yes, but he also brought in local officials, educators, business owners. The meetings were part revival, part town hall, part business school. And then, in the late 1980s, he turned his attention to the schools. In 1976, Jackson launched Push XL, a program designed to raise academic performance in Black schools by targeting something no government program had ever directly addressed: the culture inside the building. Jackson went into high schools in Chicago, Los Angeles, Kansas City. He told students directly, in language that made students uncomfortable, you cannot blame everything on the system. You have to do your part. Stay in school, study, respect your teachers. And then he turned to the school system and said, now you do your part. Hire better teachers. Fund these schools. Stop warehousing these children. Push XL operated in school districts across 15 states at its peak. Studies showed increased attendance rates and improved grades in participating schools. The program was eventually funded in part by the Carter administration's Department of Education. In 1983, Jesse Jackson announced he was running for President of the United States. The reaction was split almost perfectly along two lines: the people who had never seen themselves represented in presidential politics, who wept, and the political establishment, which quietly agreed that this could not be taken seriously. They were both wrong about what was about to happen. Jackson's 1984 campaign introduced the Rainbow Coalition, a political alliance explicitly designed to unite Black Americans, Latino Americans, poor white Americans, LGBTQ Americans, indigenous peoples, and women under one economic justice banner. It was unlike anything American politics had produced. In 1984, Jackson won primary contests in South Carolina, Louisiana, and Washington, D.C. He won 3.5 million votes, more than any Black candidate in American history to that point. He was not the nominee, but he had made the map look different. He came back in 1988 with 4 years of infrastructure built, 4 years of voter registration drives completed, and a campaign that had learned from every mistake of the first run. Jesse Jackson won 13 state primaries and caucuses in 1988, including Michigan, a major industrial state. He won 6.9 million votes and finished second in the delegate count. No Black presidential candidate before or since has come closer to a major party nomination. The night he won Michigan, the heart of the American auto industry, a state with a large white working class population, the political world stopped underestimating him. Briefly, at the 1988 Democratic National Convention in Atlanta, Jackson gave what many political scholars still consider the most extraordinary convention speech in American political history. A 45-minute address that built from a whisper to something that felt like a reckoning.
Dream of preachers and priests who will prophesy and not just profiteer, preach and dream. Our time has come. Our time has come. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. In the end, faith will not disappoint. Our time has come. Our faith, hopes, and dreams will prevail. Our time has come.
He didn't win the nomination, but he registered an estimated 1 million new black voters during those two campaigns combined. He demonstrated with evidence that a black candidate could build multiracial coalitions that won states, and he planted a seed. Political scientists trace a direct line from Jackson's Rainbow Coalition infrastructure and voter registration apparatus to the organizational model used by Barack Obama's 2008 campaign, particularly in southern states. Here's a chapter of Jesse Jackson's life that almost no one fully knows. Between his presidential campaigns and after, Jackson became something unprecedented in American public life, a private citizen who negotiated directly with foreign leaders and succeeded. In 1983, U.S. Navy Lieutenant Robert Goodman Jr., a black naval aviator, was shot down over Lebanon and captured by Syrian forces. The U.S. government was at an impasse. Jesse Jackson flew to Damascus, met personally with Syrian President Hafez al-Assad, and secured Goodman's release. The Reagan White House, which had never supported the mission, credited Jackson publicly. President Reagan, who had clashed with Jackson on virtually every domestic issue, welcomed Lieutenant Goodman and Jackson at the White House. He called it a personal mission of mercy. It was not the last time. In 1984, Jackson went to Cuba and negotiated the release of 22 American political prisoners and 26 Cuban nationals from Fidel Castro. In 1990, as Saddam Hussein held hundreds of American hostages in Kuwait following the invasion, Jackson flew to Baghdad and returned with 47 American and British hostages. Over a 15-year period, Jesse Jackson conducted private diplomatic missions to Syria in 1983, Cuba in 1984, Iraq and Kuwait in 1990, and the former Yugoslavia, 1999, securing the release of hostages and prisoners on each occasion without holding any government office. In 1999, during the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, Jackson flew to Belgrade and met with Slobodan Milosevic. He returned with 3 captured American soldiers, the first American POWs freed since the Vietnam War. A man with no government title, no official portfolio, no military escort, just the weight of his reputation, the credibility of his moral standing, and a willingness to go where no one else would. Jesse Jackson inspired millions. He built movements. He was a man of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. He preached integrity. What Jesse Jackson left behind, when you measure it honestly, is this. More than 3 million new black voters registered through his 2 presidential campaigns. The Rainbow Coalition model, the first serious attempt to build a multiracial progressive political coalition in modern American history. Dozens of corporate agreements securing jobs, contracts, and banking relationships for black communities. Hundreds of American hostages and POWs returned home through private diplomacy. The proof, with receipts, that a black American could build a coalition capable of winning states in a presidential primary. Barack Obama said it directly in 2008. He stood on the shoulders of what Jesse Jackson built, not the personality, the infrastructure, the voter files, the coalitions, the precedent. When Barack Obama won the Iowa caucuses in January 2008, a state that is 93% white, Jesse Jackson was in the audience. He wept. He didn't say anything to the cameras that night. He didn't have to. Jesse Jackson was born into a world that had already decided what he was worth. A world that told a black boy from Greenville, South Carolina, that the sidewalks were not built for him to walk on. He spent his life building sidewalks. He was not perfect. He was not always right. But he showed up for decades, in rooms he was not invited to, at tables that hadn't been set for him, in countries that had no reason to listen to him. And he made things happen that no one thought was possible. The arc of American history did not bend toward justice on its own. It bent because people like Jesse Jackson grabbed it with both hands and refused to let it go. Sadly, Jesse Jackson passed away February 17th, 2026, in Chicago, Illinois. The story of Jesse Jackson will never be over, and neither will the work he started. Before you go, drop a comment below with one thing from this video that you didn't know. We read every single one. And if this is the first time you found this channel, hit subscribe, because we have a full documentary library on the people, places, and moments that shaped Black America. We're just getting started. If you know someone who needs to see this story, someone who thinks they already know everything about Jesse Jackson, or someone who's never heard his name before, share this video with them. The people in these stories deserve to be known by everybody. We thank Jesse Jackson for all the work he did. More videos are waiting for you. See you there.
Train some youth to become a painter and artist. That's the sunny side. We leave this place looking for the sunny side because there's a brighter side somewhere. I'm more convinced than ever that we can win. We have fought up the rough side of the mountain. We can win. I just want young America to do me one favor. Just one favor. Exercise the right to dream.
Black Facts 101.